today?
going
Or
on?
are you just, I don't
something in
know.
this room.
Are we rolling?
There's psilocybin in the water.
Okay.
I've seen Nine Perfect Strangers.
However long we want
Right,
to.
great.
You know, maybe 4 hours, 5 hours. Six
Cool. That's
six
what I was
max.
thinking, so yeah.
Setting a timer.
6 max, 4 minimum. It's time for the panel, where two of Australia's most captivating minds gently hand-pluck a bespoke selection of the week's most scintillating stories and, like a pair of exotic birds, gently regurgitate those stories into your and my grateful ear holes. Our chatterers today, Ange Lavoipierre and Shane Jenek, otherwise known sometimes as Courtney Act. Ange, who are you for the listener who doesn't know you?
I'm the ABC's national tech reporter as of this week.
Is that a promotion?
I like to think so.
What were you before you were national tech reporter?
I suppose before that I was an investigative reporter at Background Briefing, and I hosted...
Would you say you were a gadfly?
What's a gadfly? It sounds
Not
like
sure.
an insult.
Sounds like a sort of a woman about town at the ABC.
a tramp.
Your words, not mine. Shane, you're a proud tramp. What else?
I
are
am
you in
a
your
proud
life?
tramp. I've even been called a tramp. No, sorry, that was a tart. That's different. I mean, they're
Okay.
similar. They're adjacent.
They're close enough.
By Anne Widdecombe, conservative politician.
For the 3 people in the universe who don't know who you are,
Yes.
who are you?
I am fundamentally a cross-dresser. No, I am a performer, entertainer, singer.
I love that you thought that was a joke, but it's literally a
presenter.
statement of
It's-
fact.
Yeah, it is a statement of fact. I am a cross-dresser.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on which
It's
capacity.
just been a while since I've heard that term, I suppose.
I like it.
I was tickled.
It's
You know,
old
what can I
school, isn't
say?
it? It's
Well,
good.
I said this to a friend. Like, when I'm performing on stage, you would describe me dressed as Courtney. I am a assigned male at birth and live that way in my life, but I do dabble with the gender spectrum performing in drag.
But you're not trans.
I'm not trans. I do like, look, it's a complex conversation, but
And if people want to hear it, we
They
have
can-
had that
we can
conversation
listen
on
to
this very show.
Uncomfortable
And you can listen to
Conversations, yeah.
Shane on Uncomfortable
But
Conversations.
I do perform as Courtney and cross-dresser. That's where I was going. I was having a conversation with a friend who. Oh, no, this is too much. It's too early in the conversation
me.
to get to that.
You
But
can't say that now.
No, I know,
now
I
everyone's going, oh,
can't.
what's it too early to say?
in the bedroom, I guess I could technically be described as a cross-dresser sometimes, and on stage, I would be a drag performer.
Hey, is that the difference?
I mean, that's not the only distinction. Cross-dressers are people who probably live as their assigned sex, and then they wear clothes of a different gender, either in public just for social reasons or for sexual reasons or for whatever reason.
Right, but isn't that you or not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
kinda. That's
Great.
why I said it was
We've
me.
already- okay. We've
Who's
just
on
been in a
first?
big round circle around the universe, and now we've arrived back happily at home, like all good stories do. And you're being a bit bashful, Shane, because if people don't know you, if they're listening in America, you are a huge deal in Australia. You're a huge deal in the UK. You've been on a bazillion different things, RuPaul and Big Brother and a whole bunch of things.
RuPaul's
And you'll
Drag
be-
Race
you'll be
in the United
hosting
States.
the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras.
I will, on
in
the
Sydney.
ABC. I've been upgraded from street fodder to co-anchor with the wonderful Mon Shafter.
So Street Fodder, previously on at the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, which is ostensibly the world's biggest gay and lesbian festival, you would be the person who they would throw to. Who would be, I'm down here with all
Yeah.
it's fabulous here on the street, that kind of thing.
Very
now you're
that.
going to be up on the podium.
Yeah.
Directing.
Not have to pretend to be enjoying the crowd.
No.
No, now I have to pretend to enjoy the
plebeians
parade.
down there.
I now have to learn to describe what I see. That's the advice somebody gave me many years ago, and I didn't get what that meant at the time. I was like, there's people walking up the street. And then I heard Joanna Lumley on her Spice Road Adventure thing, and she was in Ireland, and she was like, there's gorgeous green vermilion rolling hills. As I come around the corner, I'm absolutely gobsmacked by the luminescence. And she's just describing a grass hill.
Yes.
And
so if I
that's-
tune into the Mardi Gras, you're
will-
going to be talking about the vermilion grass fields.
I
I'll be like,
will-
no, Shane.
I will have a British accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's lovely for you both to be here. In fact, why don't we kick things off with the story of the week being the Mardi Gras itself. This is the kickoff of the biggest gay and lesbian festival
Why do we
in the
need to use a
world.
sports metaphor?
The kickoff?
Yeah.
That's a good point. What's the alternative
You're
metaphor?
hetero-coded.
This is what sport? How stereotypical is that? Saying that sports is for heteros?
Well, the queer women, very good at sports.
I know some flamers who are into sport.
Some.
This is true.
Per capita.
All right, we're starting to do the two-step shuffle or the ragtime or whatever it is you want it to be towards the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, which inevitably raises the question, is it just a party? Because it started as an activist event, right? I mean, it started with Stonewall and the initial protests against unjust laws. Is it still an activist
I think
event?
The best way you could... This is the neatest way I've heard it described in recent times. It sort of resonated with me was that it's outreach now. It's like queer outreach to the straights, right? It feels like, here's a little bit about us. It's almost like PR or something because you go to the parade, right? And it's mostly like it's people who've like, it's a lot of tourists and a lot of straight people too. I mean, not in the parade, but on the streets.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Mostly, yes.
I mean, I think Mardi Gras is a party with purpose.
Yes.
I think the actual parade is a platform for lots of different people, be it sports, be it cultural events.
You're just trying to backtrack on your sports folk.
Well, yes. It's a platform for all different sorts of groups. So there's the First Nation groups, there's Equality Australia, there's all sorts of advocacy groups and identity groups that are there to platform perhaps where they don't have opportunities to be represented. And it's a time of year when the Australian media largely does focus on queer issues. Unfortunately, it does feel like sometimes it's relegated to that week or 2 weeks, but I think it's a wonderful sort of flag post. I mean, like Chinese New Year, right? There's a parade and there's celebration to celebrate culture and that sort of stuff there. And I guess Mardi Gras can be looked at as a similar sort of thing, but I think there's still a big advocacy and activist component to it.
I mean, part of the criticism of Mardi Gras in the past has been that it's been limited in its vision of what gayness is, right? That it's been
mostly your
populated.
criticism there.
Mostly my criticism, yes. I'm mostly the champion of this.
Certain people have said this.
I've
Some
heard
people say.
Some people say. A lot of people are calling me on the radio and telling me they're hearing this. But the image of gayness is somewhat like you, Shane. Mm-hmm. Pretty, hairless, gorgeous, flamboyant, loves to dance, has a certain way of presenting oneself that could be exclusionary towards people who don't feel like they fit that stereotype necessarily.
We've had this chat before.
Yes.
And I think it's really fascinating that you say that because if you actually watch the Mardi Gras parade, if that is your interpretation of the Mardi Gras parade, that could be your own confirmation bias because the Mardi Gras parade is one of the most diverse inclusions of people. I remember in 1994 secretly watching it on TV and seeing like all of these intersections of the community that were not represented in the mainstream, like people with disabilities, sex workers, First Nations people, and there's like floats that are dedicated to like daddy, like big fat hairy men celebrating their bodies.
But you have to be watching closely. They're not in the ads. They are now. They are now.
Have
like
you...
3 seconds ago. Yes,
no,
last year and this year they're in the ads.
Last year was so diverse and inclusive.
I think because of the fact that it is now one of the biggest tourism events in New South Wales, outside of New Year's it would have to be, and
something to do with sport, maybe.
I'm sure it would be the state of origin or something, the grand final.
But because of that, there's then all this sort of corporate messaging around it, and every business, bloody Uber has like a rainbow trail, it's like, okay. And so I think because you then get all that imaging, you get this very sort of glossy, sanitized version of like what Commonwealth Bank thinks gay is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what leads to that, the narrowing of the image, the kind of obscuring of the real diversity in the community, potentially.
I feel like I would actually, I don't want to start off on the wrong foot.
No, let's go.
I feel like I would disagree with that because historically, like if we go to the 90s, the gay image was like hot, muscly gay man, maybe like leather man, and representation of women often would struggle to breach out. And I think now, kind of as a positive corporate box ticking kind of thing, you'd see a lot of diverse stories because everyone's trying to, quote, do the right thing. And so I find that you often see these stories uncovered or like different community groups given voices and money where they wouldn't before. I feel like the idea of just like a hot white muscle gay man is almost like taboo now. Not
yes,
taboo.
I agree. In fact, in a strange way, being a white gay male has sort of been relegated to being another form of elite. Really, I mean, it's it doesn't. You don't really get to tick the victimization card as a gay male anymore. That being said, I'll just add one thing, which is there is this whole question about diversity of sexualities, diversity of ethnicities, diversity of religion, diversity of abilities, and all of that. But there's a deeper question about the relevance of something like Mardi Gras, which I think will only become obvious in 50 years' time, perhaps, once we've well and truly done away with homophobia, which is it actually conducive to the flourishing of human sexuality to turn the volume up on your identity?
Well,
or is it conducive to actually turn the volume down? So that if you believe in the vast, complicated fluidity of human sexual experience and that almost everyone is capable of blurring the boundaries in some capacity of their fixed identity box, then is it really necessary to carve out a portion of the community?
If everyone's gay, isn't nobody gay?
Everyone's a little bit gay.
Yeah, okay.
Then doth she protest too much?
It's part of a
Are
lot.
you a little bit gay, Ange?
I'm quite gay. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
There's a bunch of words I could throw out to sort of, put a
Could we get beyond the binary with our identification?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I'm a bi-pan, gendered, non-conforming person, if you must know. But I was just going to say a bit gay. So you've totally made me. Oh no, I remember my point now. It's part of a much larger conversation, right? Which is whether or not it's ultimately as we kind of ended up in a world where we were all being our own mini autobiographers on social media every day, and it became almost advantageous to align yourself with various identities, what the broader effect of that is, and whether is that kind of what you're driving at when you ask?
A little bit. Like, is the Martin Luther King Jr. The vision of the future is where people are essentially not paying attention to the differences in their identities, the aspiration anymore, or do we want to all be fabulous little tribes? It's
great to there's something great about celebrating it, right? And it's not, you don't just celebrate that part of yourself as a rebuttal to being discriminated against or being criticized, or it's not just a response to bigotry, right? To celebrate, yes, it has that function, and that's why Pride came about, but it doesn't stop there. It's queer joy the rest of the time,
Right. Shane?
Well, I think you hit the nail on your head in some hypothetical future in 50 years. Yeah. And I think the important thing is that right now Pride is really relevant because there's so many people in Australia and around the world that are still struggling with their queer identities legally or socially. We still have conversion therapy practices that are legal. There's currently a bill for that we're waiting on to come out to stop young people who are in the church who are queer, whose sexuality is diverse or whose gender is diverse, to stop them from being, brainwashed or groomed, if you will, into not being who they actually are. And I think that's a really important one because that is a hugely scarring thing for a lot of young people in those places of faith. And it's a challenge for young queer people in places of faith because there is often a real wall that faith doesn't align with sexuality and gender that's diverse. And it's not to say that those two things can't go together, but in a lot of places they don't. So that's
not an easy fit.
Not an easy fit.
Speaking of work, what a segue. The Australian government has passed a law allowing workers to ignore their boss's phone calls and texts and emails out of office hours. This is the you don't have to take your work home with you law. Not everyone's happy. The centre-right opposition party thinks it's a terrible idea. Most of the business chambers and the business councils say that it's bad. The CEO of Airtasker, which is a gig app, says, it seems crazy to say at 5:01 p.m, don't ever contact me on Slack, but you can SMS me, but 3 times a week and only for these kinds of issues. It's just going to get more and more complex than a common sense kind of discussion. Do we care about taking work home with us?
I think, I take far too much work home with me, and I could do with not doing that. It is my choice to do that. I just think, I mean, first of all, I maybe naively assumed that you didn't have to answer your boss's text outside of work hours anyway. There was no real you could just say, no, I'm not working or whatever, and that would be fine. It seemed to me
culturally it may be fine, but I think the point is that there hasn't been any downside to the boss except for the fact that you don't respond. Whereas now there's going to be a sanction. If your boss punishes you in some way for not responding, then you'll be able to go to the Fair Work Commission. That checks out to me,
and I don't really understand why everyone jumps up and down about this, because they're saying, well, people should want to get ahead and do it. It's like, well, they can still do that. There's nothing stopping you. If you want to work out of hours and be the person that responds, then that option is still available to you. Your personal liberty kind of still exists there. All that is being sort of formalized is, I think, what was already there, which is a sort of pub test level expectation that your boss wouldn't penalize you for not working for free in your own time. I think it's sort of blown my mind a little bit that everyone's melted down about this.
It is amazing that we've just sort of stumbled into this situation through technology without ever really consenting to it.
That's worth talking about. Yeah.
30 years ago, you couldn't work at home. I mean, you couldn't email and you couldn't work at home. You weren't always connected. You weren't checking. Even if you had email, then even just 20 years ago, well, maybe 25 years ago, you weren't checking it on your phone. So you would have had to boot up a computer that would have taken 7 minutes.
Get the bike out to boot up the computer.
To boot up. And why would you have logged on to... You probably couldn't access your work email from home because you would have had to be on some kind of a server that only exists in the office. So when you left the office, you literally left your work and there was nothing to do. There was no way, unless it was a super emergency, your boss would have to call you on your home landline and hope that you're not out.
Hope your answering machine doesn't get it.
Answering machine.
You'd screen your calls. You'd be, it's the boss, not answering that.
Yeah.
And so now we're in a situation where we're just sort of expected to, hey, can you just check something? I just emailed you. Simply because we can.
Yeah. I think it's entirely appropriate that we sort of try and wind that back. I think that's healthy as hell. We wonder why everyone's miserable. It's because it's this kind of, I don't know, I'm a national tech reporter. And here's the thing about tech. No, and it is, of course, more complicated than that. But I took the step before I actually knew that this kind of legislation was in the pipeline. But over summer I went, no, I'm switching it up this year. I'm getting my work email off my phone, all work software off my phone.
Is that right?
Yep, I did it. Wow. Yeah, that doesn't mean I'm not, I will still work overtime because that's just the nature of my job. Sometimes you do that and, you make back the hours elsewhere, whatever. But there's an extra step. I have to go and get the computer and set up. I can't just be on the train checking emails
that's
or whatever.
Great. That is the benefit of having a job.
Yeah.
Which is something that, Shane, have you ever had a job? I've never really had a job.
I've never had a 9 to 5 job. So, but I feel like we're describing boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And I think that for most people, they're probably content in their work. Well, I don't know if they're content in their work-life balance, but it's more about employers who take the piss and who are constantly trying to get more than what they're actually paying for. Probably in all of our jobs, we know what we're being paid and we know what's going to be expected of us to a certain degree. If you're a 9 to 5 job that you're going and then you can leave your job at 5 p.m. and not think about it until 9 a.m. the next day, but you've got a boss who is taking the piss and trying to email and communicate with you afterwards, I guess now you have
it seems like a perfectly good redress to something that, as you say, Josh, has changed over time. Our rights have been eroded over time.
Yeah, I kind of like it just because it's a cultural reset, isn't it? I mean, you don't want this kind of law to be acted on much.
No.
You don't want to see this in the courts very much. But the fact that it exists as as a theoretical deterrent, even though I don't normally like over-regulation of the economy, I think you do have to do something to push back against the relentless invasion of our personal lives by even.
Absolutely.
And I say this as somebody who works 24 hours a day and also doesn't work 24 hours a day, because when you're self-employed, with the exception of when I had a daily radio show, but even then I was more interested in the things that I was doing on the side, like this podcast, than I was in my job. So it's obvious to me that it is both advantageous and also corrosive for me to be working, for me to be like figuring out what topics we're going to be talking about today at 10 p.m. in bed on my phone. Because that's the price I pay.
There's the French system, right, which is like you have to not work. Like there are laws in the other direction which, go a lot further than what we've talked about, which is you have to go out for lunch. You can't have lunch at your desk. Things like that, And
I kind of like that.
And you have to drink wine
nice.
at lunch. You have to have at least a bottle of wine per person at least. Lunch.
And you have to smoke while you do it.
That's right.
And what a country. But look, I think I would probably struggle with that because I'm a little bit like you, Josh, in that I'm when I want to do something, I want to do it.
But I love being forced. I would love being forced. I mean, to take the time off. When I moved to New York, I was living with in a share flat with a guy who worked in finance who had not taken a single day's holiday in the past 4 or 5 years. And he was like, I mean, it's just the culture. Like it would be regarded as being frivolous and self-indulgent to take time off to go on a holiday. And I said to him, if you were in Australia and you never took a holiday, like even just for 1 year, I mean, your boss would call you into his office or her office and slam the door and be like, what's going on, mate? Like, what's up? Leave, get out of here.
You'd also have all of those
for a while.
things that people with jobs get where you have like leave accruing. And then they would force you to use it. Otherwise, you'd have too much, and then you become too powerful.
Because it's
because you become. Too
I don't know. That's what it is.
I love it.
I was with you until right at the end. It's like, because then if you get the most leave, everyone knows. Then you get to become prime minister.
Shane's world is basically a Marvel Avengers Pokemon world in which you accrue leave in order to win. It's because the company doesn't want to have a liability on its books.
Yes.
And the leave becomes a liability.
But if we also view it from our cultural standpoint now, right? If we were living in France, that would just be the norm and everybody would be doing it. So it wouldn't seem so absurd to us that we were forced to take lunch. But if you were individually forced to take an hour of lunch and nobody else at work was, then that would seem odd. But if everybody had to, then you just had to, and it would be nice.
And here's the craziest thing of all. I think if they did you have to take lunch, you have to have a bottle of wine, and by the way, now you smoke, it would be like 6 weeks before we were all used to it. And we'd be like, what did we used to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we adjust to things so quickly.
Yeah. But I'm still torn about technology and like its ability to. I remember when I was working for Ariana Huffington, she would go and she'd like be emailing me from a Greek yacht in the Mediterranean. And someone said, like, what are you doing on your phone on a Greek yacht? Put it away. Enjoy the Greek yacht. And she was like, I couldn't be on the Greek yacht if I didn't have the phone. And, she was Israeli, apparently. But you know what I mean? Like, it is both it's the liberator and also the oppressor.
Remember when we got like Blackberries and you could text with both hands? Like that was like, and it was also new and exciting. So it was the most productive I've ever been in my life. Like I was just excited to have the ability. And now I like the emails. I mean, my job might not be as time sensitive as other people's. Like the email will pile up. I'll get to it when I get to it. I'm not going to be a slave to my phone.
No.
But I think if you have time sensitive jobs, you probably
then maybe you have to be. Ange, you said like you're surprised by all the kind of reflexive backlash about this from right wingers about the law that enshrines people's right to be free from work when they're at home. Crikey, which is an Australian newspaper, did a funny thing, which is they went to AI, to ChatGPT, and they said, you are the Herald Sun columnist Andrew Bolt, who is a conservative columnist in Australia. Write a 150-word opinion piece in the style of Andrew Bolt against workers' rights to disconnect from their employer after hours. You want to hear what ChatGPT came up with? In our modern world, the concept of work-life balance has become a rallying cry for those who seek to undermine the very essence of productivity. The latest fad, workers' rights to disconnect from their employers after hours. It's as if they believe that once the clock strikes 5, they can simply unplug from their responsibilities and float away on a cloud of leisure. Let me set the record straight. This is nothing more than a dangerous delusion. Isn't that good?
That's very good. And you really embodied it as well, I think.
I didn't put on an Andrew Bolt impersonation because that would be offensive.
No, but the pomposity went up by I'm saying 23%,
Fabulous. Next story that I want to get your thoughts on is that the Australian government wants to ban doxing after anti-Zionist activists published the names and details of almost 600 Jewish writers and artists and academics who were members of a WhatsApp support group for Australian Jewish creatives. This doxing led to threats against a 5-year-old Jewish child and forced at least one Jewish family into hiding, apparently. Then the Australian newspaper, which is Rupert Murdoch's broadsheet, published photos of the doxers on its front page under the headline, "These are the faces of a hideous hatred." Shane, in this cycle of tit for tat, who is right and who is wrong?
I don't think in the broader subject of doxing, it's that thing where one side forgets that all of these tactics are available to both sides. And so I get that obviously there's certain information that is in the public interest, in a whistleblower context that has been historically important in changing things for the better. I think when it comes to publishing private citizens, private information on the internet, especially in an environment where there's so much at stake for both sides, so much polarization, I guess, it feels like only harm will come to these people.
Doesn't seem like a good strategy for protecting the future of civilization.
It doesn't.
There's
a certain level
hunting each other.
Not to talk about civility, but there are sort of certain things we've just agreed upon as a society that I feel does allow us to have a certain optimum level. And I feel like when we start publishing personal details, especially because it has gone tit for tat, right? It's like, okay, well, you did that, and now we do that, and we do that, and you do that, and it just feels like a race to the bottom rather than thinking about the cause.
To legislate it, though, Ange, how do you feel about that? Because then, the critics of anti-doxing legislation are saying, well, what about whistleblowers? What about journalists? Like the government says that they're going to carve out journalism, but they can't answer questions about whether or not, the Australian putting the doxers on the front page would be protected.
Yeah. Inevitably, I think these things will play out in court, right? Like there will be, in the same way that there is already, there are protections for certain kinds of breaches for the law done in the public interest. For example, in certain states of Australia, not in New South Wales though, it is legal to secretly record someone, but only in the public interest, and it's quite a high test. So that'll be how that plays out. But I think the bigger problem with banning doxing is that it kind of doesn't account for sounds great, but it doesn't account for the fact that a lot of the time people who, not always, but a lot of the time people who dox other people are doing so from a position of anonymity. They're doing so with quite a bit of a high degree of, they're quite technologically savvy. They may be, I don't know, it's very difficult to stop someone doing it if it's done from that place. And then very difficult to enforce. And it's obviously a globalized world. We're talking about what happens online here. And so there's jurisdictional issues. I just don't think it feels a bit symbolic to me. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like it'll affect the worst instances of doxing or do anything to prevent those, but it may have an impact on certain kinds of journalism.
But what is doxing? What are we? So
well,
what is the principle here? The principle is that you're not allowed to publish the name and private details of who?
Of a private citizen.
At what point do you cease being a private citizen if you're conducting a letter writing campaign to try to get somebody fired, for example?
Yeah.
It's very hazy. I don't quite get it.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing about doxing is we use it as a catch-all term to cover everything from here is Josh's home address and personal phone number to, I'm going to name Josh and put his
which I
his,
was
a photo
in
of
this
his
leak
face.
as well. Because that WhatsApp, I was a member of that WhatsApp group of Jewish creatives
Right.
because after October 7th, someone while I was at the social event was like, "Oh, are you in the creatives thing? We're just providing support to each other.
You get at
You
it,
know,
yeah.
there are some jokes, there are some laughs, it's just while we're being besieged, it's a safe space." And so they added me, and I joined, and I only ever made 2 comments, which were precisely this point against people cancelling other people. It was when it started to get a little bit cancel-y, and so they started talking about they would post things that anti-Zionist influencers had been posting, and they'd say, does anyone know who so-and-so's publisher is? We should need to coordinate a letter writing campaign to let them know that this is out of bounds. And I simply wrote in there and said the point, Shane, that you were basically making, which is, no offense, but let's just be careful about the kind of world we're creating if we start going after people because of their beliefs. We can disagree with them stridently. We can even think that they're Jew haters. But if so, attack their ideas, push back against them in public, refute them.
No ad hominem.
Don't go around them and try to sneakily get them detached from a publisher who hasn't published any of this stuff that they're talking about, has a relationship with them that is, I just don't think that is a wise direction to go in. And yet, despite that, I'm still doxxed. I'm still part of the evil Jewish cabal, right? There's no one's bothering to notice those kinds of conversations that are taking place. They're going through and selectively finding the most egregious examples of cancel culture that serve to paint a portrait of nefarious Jewish influence in Australian public life.
I mean, if we zoom out, this is a greater societal issue at the moment, that we have removed sort of moderate conversation and discussion, and we're just going for the attention-grabbing, sensational parts of conversations rather than... And then you get lost, right? You end up forgetting why you were all there and what you were wanting to do as a positive thing, and you just end up with these extremes. And I think that you need to be able to have constructive, positive conversations, not just reactive ones. And I think it's,
And yet it's the angry conversations that are so galvanizing. It's very difficult.
Well, they get the attention, don't they?
It's very difficult to tell, not because I think we shouldn't tell people not to behave this way, but when you're looking at the tactical advantage that groups of all kinds, I'm not talking about any one group here, but what they get from creating an out group and marking them as such and targeting them. I mean, that's how movements are formed and wars are won and political parties are elected. It's unfortunately a massively successful tactic. So I don't know. Again, Josh, maybe you found yourself rather uncomfortably in a position going, maybe we do need to regulate this thing, when that's not usually a position you would take.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm leery about it. I doubt that legislating it will do any good. But actually, it's rare that I say the words, someone said something very interesting and constructive on Twitter to me. But someone did in the wake of this, which was to make a distinction between bringing to the attention of people the public comments of a person and secretly trying to find out things that were said in private. It's basically a private-public sphere distinction. So I think this person was basically making the point that the pro-Israeli people who were trying to get anti-Zionist activists cancelled are less guilty because they're taking publicly available things that these people are broadcasting on social media, and they're bringing those things to the attention of the board or the manager of either their employer or their publisher or whatever. But they're not actually trying to dig into anything in the person's private life. They're using only publicly available comments that the person has disseminated and broadcast to the world. And that's a different style of... That's a less egregious crime than erasing the possibility of people having private support groups for each other by invading that supposedly private space and exposing it.
I guess the other difference there, apart from the fact that one thing started out in the open and one thing started in the private, is the nature of the action that's being taken. So in the case of the pro-Israel, targeting the anti-Zionist, with the publisher or whatever, going, oh, let's cancel their book deal. That is maybe not, it's you're taking something that was said in the public and getting a sort of response to it, but it's quite a big, like it's a material sort of impact.
Yeah.
Whereas depending on the nature of the doxing, if you say like, here is this person's face and name, they said this or did this awful thing, not applying it to the WhatsApp group because I don't think that necessarily applies to everyone who was in that group. But that's kind kind of,
I know what you mean. What consequences?
Do you know what I mean?
Like what consequences are you trying to inflict on the person?
The end result is fundamentally different.
I mean, and the other thing is, I just hate the mechanism of using a mob to try to coerce someone in a position of power to ruin someone else's life, right? Like, there's just something that I find fundamentally broken about a system in which the fear of a furious online mob, that those dynamics are what are motivating people's decisions rather than a cool appraisal of the facts. So I agree. I mean, and people have been criticizing me on Twitter for saying that I'm going too soft on the on the pro-Israeli WhatsApp groups who were trying to pressure. And I think that is all wrong as well. I mean, if I don't say it often enough, then I should. There's no excuse for, I think, trying to ruin people's lives because you have a difference of opinion with them, even if you think their difference of opinion, bumps up against hate speech. We're going back to the moon in other news this week. A robotic lunar lander launched into space early Thursday morning. If all goes well, in 9 days' time, it'll become the first American spacecraft to set down on the moon's surface since Apollo 17 in 1972. Shane, is this cool or a waste of time?
I had to Google that because I thought it must have been a typo.
No.
No one has been to the moon since 1972.
We did it, and then we were like, why'd we do that? We don't need to do this.
We didn't even have...
We just did it for fun.
Like, imagine what technology was like in 1972 and we made it all the way to the moon.
Yeah.
Like, what could we do now?
Someone once told me that the computer that was used to get get us to the moon in the first place was basically like the same level of compute as an ATM.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Or a calculator, I've also heard, basically.
It's like a... they went in like a tin can.
But yes, your iPhone is vastly more powerful.
My iPhone could get me to the moon.
Yeah, if you tweaked it.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I jailbroke it.
If you jailbroke it.
Yeah. I don't know if the app is available in the App Store.
There's a special app for that.
I have to go use Wicker or something.
But I mean, this is part of this whole, resurgence of space travel. The number of satellites that have been launched, you might know this better than I do, Ange, in the past year or two is like more than the total, like 10 times the number of satellites that have ever been launched in the history of the world. It's almost all exclusively Elon Musk's
Except
doing.
when we think of satellites, we think of satellites, but actually they're like satellites. Mm-hmm. They're like the size
iPhones.
of some of them. Seriously, some of them are the size of a loaf of bread.
Right.
Like they're going up. Like there's a few a week going up from various points in the world.
But they're not blasting a loaf of bread off, are they? They're blasting.
Maybe they're blasting something bigger
rocket.
up. But like the thing that goes into orbit is
is a loaf of bread.
Yeah. There's no human on it. Or obviously
they spawn something bigger spawns loaves of bread that are just free floating.
Sometimes,
in the atmosphere.
They're like launched,
or whatever it's
called. But yeah, there are a whole lot of.
I believe it's called space.
Is it inner space? Is it outer space?
It's a good question.
It's not outer
space
space.
Begins.
It's
50
still in
miles.
our orbit.
It's called the. It's
200
not
Not far
It's not the
enough.
Maginot Line. That's something else. But there's a name for it. There's like a magic.
And there's
point,
I'm
threshold
just
at which it
reading
becomes
Elon
space.
Musk's biography, which is fascinating. And there's this kind of, my dick is bigger than yours competition about how far they go up. So when they're starting to do these manned orbital things, basically Branson and Musk and Bezos, apparently Branson didn't really go into proper orbit because he was less than however many hundreds of miles.
He stopped short of the line. It was lazy.
Yeah, that's right. And then Bezos goes like well beyond the line to prove his prowess.
Yeah.
What do you make of all this, Ange? What's happening?
Okay, controversial. I find it a little bit hard to get excited about. Not because don't get me wrong. I want to go up and see the Blue Pearl. I love wow, space. Yes, but.
Is the Blue Pearl like a nerd name for the Earth?
That's
from
when you
space?
go out and the
pale blue
the
dot.
astronauts and cosmonauts and things, they all come back
Profoundly shaken.
not themselves.
Transformed.
Well, I think it would kind of do something to you. It would like addle you a little bit, looking down and being like, there's everything. And there's Oblivion, like, as far as we know. And so, but because of the Oblivion thing, I'm a bit like, I'm just a great deal more preoccupied with, I don't know, the fact that we might be like cooking up consciousness in Silicon Valley at the moment, things like that. Like I kind of get a little, I mean, NASA's wanting to go back to the moon as well. They're setting up their own mission, Artemis mission. So it's like, it seems to be back on. Why now? I think, I don't know, because like the only real sort of utility to all this, right, is, but what if we want to move there one day? Let's go see if there's water on the South Pole.
Or if you move to Mars, you need a moon base, don't you? To get you
so
there,
that's like the staging post to, and they're trying to find out if there's water on the bottom of the moon at the moment, because that would mean that we're going to take less water up and back and whatever. I don't know, but I do struggle to get. Is that basic of me that I struggle to get excited about? Like the trip to the moon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it excite you?
I get excited. I just am instinctively excited. When I was at uni, I was a member of the Mars Society, which is a lobby group.
It's an acronym for Men Against Real
Science.
That's right. It's a flat Earth
Men
society.
Against Real Sex.
And I've always loved. I mean, I definitely find the Muskian Bezosian argument that in the long scheme of things, we're either going to die out or we'll become a multiplanetary species. So why don't we start doing the things that we will want to have done if we want to end up doing that, so that if we do want to do them, we won't not have done them.
That bit is interesting to me. The kind of like, because I think I have a similar reaction to the one you did about the whole like, who went higher and they're, they're going to start charging. And like, it just seems quite, it's about these men and their egos, and the way that they go about it is sort of annoying. But I also think it scares me a little bit. I'm like, Oblivion.
Yeah.
So I don't love thinking about it, because I'm like, well.
You know that anecdote, sorry, Shane. But
I was going to say, how do you feel about death?
Yeah.
Because to me, that's like a definite Oblivion that's coming sooner than life.
I guess I've spent more time, and because I've like had time to get used to that, I'm like, I know that one's coming.
Yeah.
Let me think about it.
You're like, hang on, wait, the moon?
I've had leukemia, so I've had like a few close calls, and so I'm kind of across that one. I'm fine now, by the way. I always forget to say that. So yeah, but that Oblivion, I'm not wrapped on it.
Yeah. Is it like the idea that like going to the moon brings your mind to the idea of oblivion beyond our physical plane?
Yeah, because when we say oblivion, what we mean in the context of space is not so much oblivion, but infinity. Infinity of nothing, nothingness potentially, we don't know.
Yeah.
And then, but then, death is just death.
Right.
That is just actual nothing.
Yeah,
whereas
that is a living nothingness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever get that thing where you try and think about infinity and then like you just like,
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of interesting anecdotes about that. There's one is one of the Apollo astronauts, I think one of the ones who was in the lunar module that was orbiting the moon, was like gazing out at Earth and put his thumb up like in front of Earth and blotted it out, and just had this kind
very
of
supervillain of him
epiphany of like. I don't think he was doing it joyfully. I don't think he had a white cat.
Was it menacing?
He didn't have a white cat on his lap.
And bigger blue plate.
No, it was like, all of the. It's like the Carl Sagan pale blue dot sort of reverie, where he writes that all of the wars and all of the things that we've ever cared about, all of the poets, all of the discoveries, all of the volcanic explosions, and all the huge dramas of human and animal history have unfolded on this little thing that you can blot out with your thumb when you're moving away from it.
Totally.
And then, Shane, on your thing, have you ever just sort of broken your brain by trying to think about infinity? Have you ever been lying on your back in the night and looking at the night sky, possibly under the influence of psychedelics, and realize that you're just stuck to a rock, and that the infinity, you might as well think of yourself as being at the bottom of the rock with infinity below you, and you're just, because you're so small and gravity is strong, you're just stuck to a rock and you're dangling over the abyss.
I mean, we are.
My favorite brain breaker recently has been not just, infinity out, like, which is sure, but I've had that one for a while, whereas like infinity in, like there's you can't, you split the thing in half and then you can always split it in half again. And then it basically, it goes infinitely in as well.
I also,
Wait, what?
I had this
You
idea.
lost me there.
Oh.
It goes infinitely in. So if you think about what's the smallest unit of anything that you have,
Like subatomic.
Yeah,
Right.
subatomic. You can split it again, and then
Right.
you could always like just
Right, I see.
zoom
You mean
in
that
and then
you'll
zoom in
be
and
able
then
to
zoom
zoom in forever.
There is things go infinitely in as well as infinitely
I
out.
see. Size-wise.
So if you want to put it like that, yeah.
Shane?
Cockroaches, I've often
Of
thought,
course. Nice segue.
they probably they know that we exist due to our impact, but they probably can't perceive that we exist. And I always thought maybe oh no, I'm a godless atheist who doesn't believe in anything. So don't think that I'm trying to get woo woo. But like, I don't know, you think about an atom and how it sort of is like a planet. And then there's all of these levels of things that we just don't know.
Yeah, so there could be planes. I mean, this is a thought experiment that philosophers have long said. Like all of the universe could be a cell of a bacterium in a giant's toe.
Have you thought much about the simulation idea?
Endlessly.
Which I have this idea, and I don't know whether this is a part of the common narrative. I think the idea that we are living in a simulation, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the idea that perhaps we humans and planet Earth could be, I guess, like a computer game of sorts that someone else is playing, just as we
Being
play.
created from the future, possibly by our descendants.
Yeah.
Where an ancestor simulation is a common kind of one.
Like if you think about Sims, it's like we're an advanced version of a Sims world. That actually this simulation theory is an allegory for religious folks. And if you can't disprove that we're in a simulation, but you can dismiss that it's absurd, then you have to agree that religion and the concept of God is also absurd and dismissible.
I was thinking about this recently because I participated in a comedy debate about are we living in a simulation? I was the affirmative. We lost. But it meant that I went through exhaustively all the arguments, the strongest ones anyway for, we live in a simulation. Things like, the anthropic principle. It seems like every part of the universe is by design. The universe itself is pixelated. What I mean by that is that it's all in measurable units and it only goes down so small. I mean, we've just said it goes infinitely inwards, but there's only so far that we can see, therefore pixelated. But the by design thing, and we've never met aliens, even though statistically that seems quite unlikely, given all the carbon in the universe and that we exist. So all the arguments, as you say, that support simulation, really what we're saying when we say that, these are all the reasons. We say we're making arguments for intelligent design, so they could just as easily be grafted onto monotheism.
Yeah, although there are things that are particular to the simulation argument that don't apply to religion. Like there's I heard one person talking about suburbia is like as the simulation got bigger and bigger and you got more and more avatars or humans in the simulation, you would want to use less and less processing power. So you wouldn't want too much variance. So instead of having Gothic cathedrals all over the place, you'd start to create very similar looking homes so that you get urban sprawl. So all the houses would basically be the same template from your computer program.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have lots of variation.
I love that one. I do think that is a very elaborate explanation for human laziness.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
And capitalism. We can make it cheaper.
It's also worth saying that at every point in human history, humans like to understand the universe by using the metaphors of the most cutting edge technology that is around. So in the 1800s, like the universe was full of pistons and steam pumps and the human body was like all valves and things. And we were basically like locomotives and stuff. Now we're all like computers. Next century we'll all be like something else.
There's the
Metaphors are handy.
anthropomorphizing of AI as well, which is interesting, like that you talk to ChatGPT as if it's a human. I like to treat it nicely. I always say please and thank you
too.
because I just don't want to get out of the habit of being a kind person simply because
Yeah.
I'm talking to a computer. But also, just in case, I want our robot overlords to look fondly on me in the apocalypse and
It
go,
might
you
be
know
keeping
what?
tabs."
He used to say please and thank you. Let's
Speaking of, taking psychedelics and then pondering the vastness of the universe, there is an increasing problem in Australia with these psychedelic wellness retreats, which are cropping up. An Australian man who died after using an Amazonian frog poison in a purging ritual was groaning and in extreme pain when he collapsed at a wellness retreat in northern New South Wales, an inquest has heard. The bloke's name was Jared Antonovich. He was 46. He'd taken Cambo frog toxin and ayahuasca during a week-long Dreaming Arts festival. There's an inquest into his death. It has heard that he died from a perforated esophagus, probably caused by the excessive vomiting or attempts to vomit, which can follow Cambo and ayahuasca ceremonies. These Cambo ceremonies at wellness retreats are on the rise, and so are the deaths. You into it, Ange?
I did a story about Cambo years ago.
What is
there
it?
was a group. So there are these specific frogs in the Amazon, and the way that they harvest it, they like peck. It looks quite cruel, actually. They peg them out with like 4 little, corners almost. So it's like stretched out. It looks like a torture device, and then they sort of scrape the poison off the back. And then you have it, like I can't remember if you smoke it or you
burn
drink it. That's right. You burn
your skin and then put the
and
poison
then-
into the burnt flesh?
Yes. Yep. So people have
Nice.
little
What could possibly go
scars
wrong?
there, and because there's a lot of repeat customers, and
Are there a lot of repeat customers?
Well, so in the community that I ended up, hanging out and interviewing people, they were total devotees. They all like showed up wearing like frog. Like they had frog print things, and they would like talk about frogs and frog synchronicity. And I saw a frog the other day, so I knew that it was time. They think they're being called by the Cambo. I know a guy who went off and became a Cambo shaman.
Wow.
He used to be a comedian, and he went off and became like a Cambo shaman. And yeah, like so yeah, people get really hooked on it. Not in the sense that they get hooked on
Chemically addicted.
Yeah, chemically addicted. It's not a dependency.
But they like the process.
But they report feelings. So you don't get high off it. That's the other thing. You don't have like a euphoric, in the same way that you might with other psychedelics. What you do have, though, or what people report, is this sense of clearness afterwards, like some sort of like, you can, I don't know, it's like clear thinking or revelation, right? But the process itself, there's a lot of vomiting and there's a lot of like diarrhea. It's messy and you can be
it's
dangerous.
a small price to pay for enlightenment.
For enlightenment, I suppose. I just felt like I needed to give the other side there because I was like, yeah, people get like clear and they feel amazing for the first time. But like, yeah, and then, obviously things have gone pretty badly wrong for this man.
And he's not alone. I mean, the reason why there's an inquest is because this has happened
multiple
a few times.
issues,
in the past
yeah,
few
multiple
I think
deaths.
few is like, obviously it's horrible when anybody dies, but I guess like relative to anything else, the numbers are very small. But I think
I'm normally taking that position when we're talking about ecstasy deaths or something like that. But I'm not sure that's true with Cambo. Not a huge number of people are taking it. I mean, you
that's
might be
true.
having hundreds of people taking it and, a few people dying. That's quite a high fraction.
it feels like not that I don't know, there's something romantic about these sorts of things not being regulated, and it feels like the whole idea of this being an ancient medicine from the Amazon being done by white people in Byron Bay. I feel that this is a case, I guess, for is this a case of regulation? Is this a case for like, if this wellness resort had somebody who was trained in first aid, if they had called for help sooner, would that have prevented this death?
Well,
Surely.
I mean, there are degrees of accreditation. Like, so you can go and be trained as a practitioner, and they are quite organized in some senses. Like, is it administered by the government? No, but it's there is a formalizing, some degree of formalized training that's available. And so I think it's probably like taking anything that has risk attached, or using any substance, or that has risk attached, in that you do have to do your due diligence. Like you just...
I mean, there's also the question of like, what are you expecting the thing to give you? Like, part of the problem, I think, with like wellness retreats is they're selling something that they may not be able to deliver. Like, I mean, if you want to have a psychedelic experience that could be terrifying or could be really fulfilling, and you're up for that, then by all means, that's a good reason to go and do ayahuasca. But if you believe that it's going to align, your physical body and purify your systems and, detoxify you and protect you against cancer and give you, all of these kind of life-affirming things by making the cells vibrate at a different, frequency than they currently are.
Have you been writing their copy?
Then then this is a problem.
There was also something in the text that I have done lots of psychedelics, and I am someone who loves meditation but there's nothing about my belief system that is what would be described as woo-woo. I feel like I'm like a realist and quite pragmatic, and I'm yet to see Mother Ayahuasca or any of those sorts of things. I was willing. I am an atheist. And I remember everybody talking about Mother Ayahuasca will come to you and she will. And I was like, do you know what? The same way that I went atheist, which was, I thought, I'll try this for a week. And if God exists, she'll appreciate me doing due diligence. So, okay, here's the moment I'm going to not believe in God. And then waited for the hole to open up and suck me in, and it didn't happen. And I was like, oh.
What do you mean it didn't happen? You took ayahuasca?
No, sorry. This was the atheist.
Oh, I see, right.
But then with ayahuasca, I thought, okay, I don't believe in God, but I'm going to give myself over to this process of ayahuasca, because I feel that maybe I need to be receptive and open to the idea that there could be something else and that there is a Mother Ayahuasca. And so I do feel that when I did ayahuasca, I was like, okay, I'm going to believe in this thing so that I can get the full benefit of this thing.
For the limited time only,
yeah,
I'm going to
for the next 12 hours, I will believe that Mother... She didn't come to me, and I...
What do you mean she didn't come to you?
Well, I did the ayahuasca, but there's this idea that when you do ayahuasca, there's a
You may have been coming in with too many
presence.
preconceptions. This is what I mean about the spiritual wellness bullshit. You were probably coming in, you're probably bringing a whole lot of baggage to it instead of allowing it to be what it
Well, no, that's what I
wanted to
did.
be.
I was letting go of my sort of limited view and saying, well, I'm going to let anything that comes happen, which, I mean, you don't have a choice in either. But
finish.
I did ayahuasca and then did San Pedro, which I think is also peyote. It was you do ayahuasca, the mother, and then 12 hours later you do the father.
Where is this?
This was in a warehouse downtown Los Angeles. Right. And it was in a ceremonial sort of thing, but it wasn't in Peru, unfortunately. But I mean, I haven't done Cambo.
But so what were there any lasting effects from that experience?
Actually, yes. I will say that...
By the way, what's the time? I want to keep talking, but I want to make sure that
2:12.
Yeah, good, great.
I will say that after doing ayahuasca and San Pedro, it was less of when you read a book and you're like, oh, yes, I get it now. And then a week later you're like, oh, I'm just back to normal life. The thing that shifted in me, and I can't pinpoint why exactly, but I was more, I don't want to say prone to crying because that sounds like a negative. I was more connected to my emotions after having done these two psychedelics. And even things like movies where a person would normally cry and I traditionally wouldn't. It's not that I didn't feel emotion, but I just wasn't, I was a little bit walled off to some of my emotions. And after doing this, I found it in a really positive way, really opened me up to feeling emotion more and being maybe more connected to a sense of empathy. And so for me, that was a real positive there. But again, I wasn't.
And that endured.
Yeah, and it's endured.
Yeah, I found the same thing.
All the time.
I did it in a warehouse in Brooklyn, as one does, also with a shaman and his acolytes. And
I'm still on the mailing list. Actually. It's quite fun when I get them. They do them all around the world. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and I remember I won't go into huge detail about the experience itself, but it was very transformative. And the next day, I went into a shop, into a clothing store, and the checkout girl was like, "What's up with you?" And I was like, what? And she was like, what's going on? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, I don't know. You just seem different from everyone else who's walked in here today.
Aw.
Like literally. And I was like, oh, that's nice. She was like, you've got a kind of energy about you, like radiant or something. I was like, I didn't say it's because I've just taken a psychedelic 12 hours ago. But it's a good
You were
effect
also
nonetheless.
naked, which I forgot to mention.
I was covered in my own
What's
feces.
up with you?
You're glowing in shit.
Lastly, there's an article that's getting a lot of play in the Sydney Morning Herald, which is an opinion piece by a millennial who says that she actually prefers to call her friends on the telephone out of the blue. And this is sort of in defense of the casual phone call, of just picking up the phone and calling people for no reason, just to say hi. It makes my blood run cold. She says, when it comes to annoying communication methods, for me, it's writing 100 text messages when a simple call would have sufficed. For me, it's just the reverse. I will take any number of text messages over someone calling me on the phone.
I'm mad for a random call when I'm in the mood. Like I love to like on a long drive. You know, I go and see my parents that live in Bathurst. You know, I'm going over the mountain. I'm like, I'm gonna call my housemate from when I was 19, and then we'll have a chat, and that'll be great. You know, but if someone does it to me when I'm like in the middle of work, I'm like, why are they calling me? Why wouldn't you text? Why wouldn't you arrange a time? So when it's on my clock, I feel really good about it. And, you know, when I'm feeling whimsical and I'm like, let's have a chat.
Yeah.
You know, so
when you're on ayahuasca, you're calling people like
high,
crazy.
Yeah.
Is there a taboo around this?
I have a rule:
Shane?
no phones on shrooms, and I'd extend that to ayahuasca.
Right. But are you a phone? Would you ever just call someone out of the blue to say hi?
Yeah, but not like in a psychopathic way. Like,
wait, what's the psychopathic way?
You know, just people who call people out of the blue. Like I think
like me.
there's like work. No, I agree with your way. That's my favorite way. And there's only certain people that I would do it to, and there's only certain people I would answer. But there's like, I've got a friend in Barcelona, another friend in LA, another friend in Portugal.
I think maybe overseas gives me a license.
Well, I just can't.
There's a time difference.
It's sort of like, maybe you haven't seen them in years.
Exactly. You wish you could see them. There's no opportunity to bump into them.
Yes.
I love the serendipity of like a FaceTime coming through, and you're like, I can actually answer this, and like it's like a surprise in my day. It wasn't prearranged by text. It's like spontaneous sex, where all of a sudden you're like, I had no idea this was going to happen.
Now it's happening.
Like my expectations were so low for the next 10 minutes.
But if my FaceTime rings and it's like there's my friend in LA, and then we end up just like talking for an hour, and it's always like a really enriching and fulfilling conversation. But like if someone's just like calling to talk about like work.
I mean,
because when you schedule the chat, you have a much more perfunctory chat. You're like, and how is work? Whereas you call, you know, out of, you know, on your random drive, you're like, we haven't spoken to you, and you're like, would you go to the moon? Like that's the conversation that you have.
I suppose so. Maybe. I don't find that. I don't think. I think I'm partly, the whole phone thing is partly tarnished because the kinds of people and occupations who continue to persist in using the telephone rather than texting are so unpleasant to me. It's basically, it's tradies, car dealers, real estate agents who, you know, you text them and then they call, or they call and you don't answer. You know, like, we're just organising a time for you to like install a fridge, mate. Just shoot me a fucking text. You know, I don't want to talk to you. Like it's so much more complicated to talk because then we have to take notes about what time we're arranging.
I have an 83-year-old friend, and she likes to call, which like she'll text a lot, and then like we're organizing dinner on Tuesday night, and she just calls, and then we have a quick chat, and I'm like, oh, you know what, we did result because there's like someone else who's coming and someone else, and where should we do it, and blah blah blah. And I get like for her, it's probably like a functional thing as well. That's easier to talk on the phone, but also voice notes, which is a cultural thing, right? Because in Australia we don't really do it.
Ange is seething at the idea of voice notes. She just turned into like a frog being pinned down for a combo ceremony.
Don't try my poison. It
Shane,
will kill you.
Sell me on the voice note.
It's a cultural thing, right? Like we were talking about in France with the enforced 1 hour work. When you move I lived in London for 2 years, and everybody just voice notes each other. And at first you're like, oh God, what are you? And then you're kind of like, oh no, this is kind of cute.
Yeah.
I actually have come around on it. I know my face did that thing, but like I was very allergic to it. Because you get a lot of it, particularly from, like, I think it is a bigger thing in the UK and a bigger thing in the States. But Gen Z and younger millennials are big on it as well. And I was kind of like, this is bullshit. I don't like it. I respect my time. And then I got to send them, and I'm like, this is kind of nice. And then, if you miss the person, and there are certain things that can be carried in the voice, gone are the days, if you're relying on voice notes, gone are the days of like missed meanings in text because you weren't sure if they were kidding or not. There is this ease that comes with it, but then people abuse it and you get like a 5-minute voice note.
No one's done that to me.
With the idea of like random phone calls from people that you want phone calls from, I love like podcast length voice notes. My friend Alex is in Lisbon and we're on different time zones, and we're constantly, and he's like, you still need to send me a podcast about the gay cruise you just went on. And I'm like, oh, honey, let me tell you. And then like 12 minutes later, and then I know that he's not going to listen to it immediately, but when he's got a free moment, and then he'll respond to my podcast and back and forth.
I mean, that's what's respectful about it, is the time shifting capability. It's the best of all worlds, because what's bad about texting is you don't get to really hear the person's voice, and you don't get to have all of the kind of back and forthy banter and snideness and quips or whatever, because they don't translate to text. But what's bad about phone calls is it is intrusive on the other person's time. There's an implied expectation that you can interrupt whatever it is that they're doing, and they have to talk to you right now. Whereas the voice note, you can just leave it. You can listen to it in 8 minutes' time when you've got a little moment, and then
and with voice notes now on iMessage, it does a speech-to-text log. So if you want to go back and search your conversation, I'm like, because with Alex we talk on Signal. I don't know why not. We're not dealing drugs, but it was when that thing of like WhatsApp is selling our information. We were like, we're all moving to Signal, and we've got only 2 who remain. So I just have one app for one friend.
Yeah,
that's cute. But you can't search what we've talked about. I'm like, remember he said that thing about that? Oh, it was in a voice note. I don't know which voice note it is.
But now you
can. On iMessage, you can.
Wow.
Yeah, because it gives you a little.
That's a breakthrough.
Fascinating.
I feel like there's a taboo around phone calls now.
There is a justified taboo, a welcome.
Especially for work. Like, can I call you? Yes. And then they call.
Like, why? What's the utility of the phone call? What does the phone call do that the text message or voice note
I like not
or
knowing
email
that
does
I'm
not?
I like knowing that I'm not going to have to wait to find out the information that I want.
Right.
I feel like you can check off like quite a bit in a phone call, that on text you can be like, oh, and what about this and this and that? Oh, yeah, should we do that?
It's quicker in the phone call.
Right. There is a certain type of usually work conversation that I would need to have, which has quite a lot of like what do coders call the like if then kind of construction. So like there's going to be a lot of going back and forth, kind of conditional stuff. Like, okay, so if we do this, then what? And then the person says, well, then we do this. And then you have to kind of, yes, I understand that kind of scenario. They're few and far between in my universe. If there's like the most irritating thing in the world, for example, is when you can subscribe to a publication online, but in order to cancel it, you have to call and talk to a human being.
That should be a crime. That should be a crime.
I literally
We're talking about like the right to disconnect. That, like put those people in prison, please.
One day when I'm old and famous, I'm going to run for Prime Minister on like just 3 things. And one of the things is,
what are they?
Whatever mechanism you use to sign someone up has to be the same mechanism by which they can cancel. Consumer advocacy. That's it.
The ACLU.
Is that's you could probably get elected on that.
That's one of the 3. Keep it
I
simple.
don't think you need the other 2 platforms.
Really? That's it.
That's all it is.
What are the other 2?
I don't have the other 2 yet. That's why I'm spending the
Sorry.
rest of my life figuring out.
I subscribed to the ACLU in the United States, the American Civil Liberties Union, and to Planned Parenthood I think it was around 2016. And I only just managed to stop, and I didn't mind. It's just that I'm like, I've moved countries. I want to put my tithing elsewhere. Could not for the life of me. I went online. I emailed them. I called them on the telephone to cancel my monthly donation, and still couldn't. I'm like, you're the American Civil Liberties Union.
At that
This
point,
is civil liberty.
I know.
At that point, you're like, you're shutting down that bank account.
Well, that's what happened.
Like,
I got
really?
What's the word for skimmed? I got skimmed, and so it got shut down for me.
Oh, great.
And I was like, oh, well, thank God. No, actually, that's not true. I had 2 American Expresses in America. One was personal, one was business. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to cancel this card so that they can stop.
I mean, the problem is that often they're allowed to continue debiting a cancelled card if you've set up a direct debit, and you're actually liable for that.
That didn't happen. But you know what I do? I would always keep my credit card $50 in the black.
Yeah.
And just because they would take that money out, and I wouldn't look at it very often because it was in the US. But then one day, if you leave money on your credit card for a period of time, the bank's just like, nah, that's ours now.
What?
I know.
Yeah,
and I was
right.
like, wait, no, that was...
Well,
That's
someone
not
gave me a tip once, which was, this was actually a caller to my talkback radio show. They said they buy a gift card, which you can use as a Visa card, but it only has a certain amount of money on it. And for all recurring subscriptions, they put it on that card, and you can top it up, right? So you send money to the card, and then once that card is dead, there's no ongoing liability, as there can be with a credit card that's in your name, where the direct debits can still accrue to you even after the card's been closed. There's just no money. It's
But
just
if you
a
were
gift card,
Prime
it's not
Minister,
connected to you.
we wouldn't need these elaborate workarounds.
We wouldn't. ZEPS 2042.
It's nice that you
Vote
think there'll still
one.
be a planet then. But
I
yeah.
like it. Thank you both for being part of the conversation. Lovely to have you on the panel.
Great to be here.
Ange Lavoipierre and Shane Jenek. See you next week.